Hello, welcome once again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Molero.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys, dedicated to the proposition that the IRS is a criminal enterprise that needs to be thrown on the scrap heap of history along with the income tax that it administers and enforces.
Here, here.
We've used that before, and that works really well. Mercy. So, excuse me, the little cough is still back with me. I'll have to bear with me here.
Okay, well, we got some more throat lozenges there. Feel free to pop one in. But anyways, the last show, we did some role-playing. We tried to make it entertaining and so forth. Candidate Bob Paxton was pretending to have a problem with the fair tax.
And first time I've worn a coat in ages. And of course, Randy had to make fun of me for it. I saw his Facebook post. That's all right.
But, had to look like a candidate.
I told him you had a gun. That's why I was doing that. But who knows?
Anyways, okay. So we are going to do a follow-up to that because at best, that's an artificial situation. A candidate or an elected official is not going to sit there for 20 minutes while somebody hammers him or her on the fair tax if they don't understand it. So we are going to do a show in which we talk about the best way to approach either a candidate or an elected official about the fair tax.
And hopefully we can get a little expert advice on this one. We're trying to work out the logistics to get an expert, and that's really all we're going to say about it because she may or may not be able to join us.
Yeah, it depends on scheduling.
Yeah,
it's always candidates. We're trying to get
someone who is well versed in the operation of town halls, has done dozens, if not hundreds of them.
You're giving them way too much information.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that we may have somebody with us to help that. Otherwise, we'll just have to muddle through it ourselves. We do have some fun with those role-playing things every now and then.
But they're instructive. I mean, they're not realistic, but they're instructive, okay? So we're going to follow up on that.
If we can get the logistics worked out, we'll do that. If not, then we'll just keep on trucking. Now, meanwhile, there, say, go to your grassroots corner, because I need some more
Okay, let's do the Grassroots Corner first, and then we'll talk about the subject of today's show. Okay, this is the Grassroots Corner from January 17th by Jim Bennett. Jim Bennett is the Grassroots Coordinator for the national group, Americans for Fair Taxation, and you'll see his email address down below here. Meet Marty Sturmer. That's the title. Our California State Director, Marty Sturmer, was elected to the Board of Directors of the Americans for Fair Taxation in June of 2019. Marty was a rebel looking for a cause when he learned about the fair tax. But let's first examine some of his personal history. Now, usually we don't go into personal history, but this time it really makes a difference. It's important, okay? Marty had been a stay-at-home dad raising a son and a daughter. Marty's son married a Japanese girl, now lives in Tokyo with 2 daughters. Marty's daughter is in medical school, and Deb, his wife, is an attorney born and raised in San Francisco. Marty had been looking for a way to contain the excesses of the IRS, and here's why. Deb worked for a New York law firm, but was based in San Francisco. Deb handled many insurance defense cases, and her work required her to travel. Because of the travel, mostly to 5 or 6 states where Deb earned income, she had to file state returns that had an impact on her federal return and each other. Every time there was an adjustment in one state return, corresponding adjustments had to be made to the other state return and on the federal return. Can you imagine the nightmare? All right. The back and forth became the closest thing on earth to a perpetual motion machine, which, by the way, does not exist in physics, but only in the tax law. Mm-hmm. The process simply never came to rest, and then it was a new year and it was time to start all over again. So the process was taking too much out of the Sturmers, who never knew what their finances would be. There had to be a better way, and there's more to this. I encourage you to look this up. Like I said, it's in the January 17th Fair Tax Friday. If you're not getting Fair Tax Friday, which is an email and a video and a podcast, if you're not getting Fair Tax Friday email in your inbox every Friday, then you need to go to fairtax.org And as soon as you get on that page, a little page will pop up asking you to subscribe. They never sell or share your information. You will not get spam because you signed up with AFFT, okay? But once you sign up, you'll start getting the Fair Tax Friday, and you can read the rest of this and all the other reports, plus not to mention Steve's chairman's report.
Yes.
Every week, okay? So that's our Grassroots Corner for this week.
What Deb needs is for every state to do what Alabama and Georgia are doing, get rid of their state income tax and replace it with a consumption tax modeled after the fair tax. Yeah. And then once we see how well that works at the state level, we move it up to the national level and throw the IRS on the scrap heap of history where it belongs.
And if you want to know more about the Alabama thing, listen to episode 194 2 weeks ago. Randy Fisher was here with us, and he gave us the lowdown on everything that's happening in Alabama, Georgia, and a bunch of other states as far as a state-level fair tax.
Yeah.
Good information.
And if we can work this out, another logistical problem, we will be going to Alabama to talk to the folks behind that movement. And right now, we're having a hard time making the logistics work, but hopefully we can. Again, not going to promise it, but it's something we have on the radar to try to get done.
Yeah.
Okay. Real quickly before we dig in today, let's keep our eye on Congress.gov so you don't have to. I found something that I was just amazed. Do you realize that Chuck Schumer now supports the fair tax?
Oh, really?
I wish.
Oh, I'm impressed.
Chuck Schumer has filed the bill S-3178. Now, just going by the title of it here, Restoring Tax Fairness for States and Localities Act.
Oh, I'm all for it.
He wants to make taxes, of course, you look at it, and what he wants to do is lift the limit on the deductibility of state and local taxes, because he says that's hurting his high tax state. But it would be really nice, Chucky, if you really want to restore tax fairness, not only to states and localities, but to individuals and businesses and everyone living within the border of the United States, H.R. 25.
Yeah.
Check it out.
That will take care of it.
That will take care of it.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of wrangling about that. The what they call the SALT provision in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has really caused a lot of problems with the very upper income people who get to deduct that stuff while the rest of us...
It's not fair that you cannot deduct your state and local taxes from a place like New York that really sucks it to the upper end like that. So whatever. So Mr. Schumer, if you would like to really have tax fairness, support the fair tax. Of course, we don't have a bill in the Senate yet. It's still H.R. 25.
Yeah.
But when that comes over, you can go for it.
Hopefully we'll get a Senate sponsor here pretty soon.
All right. So now, we're ready to move on.
Yeah.
We're going to have some fun here today.
A few days ago, I was doing my thing on social media, Facebook and so forth. I was reposting some Fairtax Power Radio stuff on a couple, and I had a guy come back to me, and he gave me two links. One was to Hugh Hewitt, all right, who is a radio, he has a radio show, all right, and it's actually from a show that he did in 2009, which, if you follow the chronology there, is not too long after the second Fairtax book came out, which came out in 2008.
April of 2009, almost 11 years old.
Yeah, and he and Hank Adler wrote a book called The Fairtax Fantasy. They think the fair tax, at the time, I don't know if he still believes that. I did check with the president of the national group, Steve Hayes. He has offered to debate Mr. Hewitt, and apparently has not taken him up on that opportunity.
Wonder why.
But anyways, so they have the discussion about the fair tax, and it points out, and I'm not trying to pick on Hugh Hewitt, all right? He says in here, for instance, Hank Adler is a professor of accounting. So they, and I can't remember what Hewitt's background is, but they grew up on the income tax. That's all they know. And it's really hard to break out of that box, that income tax box. So You want to start with the first part there?
Yeah, well, Hewitt is making note of the fact that Americans are concerned about how much taxes are going on, that they really don't like the system that we've got, and that there's a movement to try to change things. And he's saying, well, I want to make sure that energy that's behind tax reform now doesn't get misdirected in the wrong direction, i.e. towards the fair tax. He calls the fair tax a very, very bad idea. And there's one thing that folks need to remember when you're talking about the fair tax. The only perfect tax system is one where everybody's rate is zero, and the government still remains fully funded. Now, I'm not sure how they're going to have a perfect tax system like that, but that's what they're doing.
If anybody knows how to do that, the FAIRtax Guys at gmail.com.
Yes, that we'd love to hear about that. But you got to remember that when you're talking about people pointing out, gee, what's wrong with a fair tax? And Hugh's got some things that he thinks are wrong with a fair tax. Ask yourself the question, don't compare the fair tax versus perfection. Compare the fair tax versus the income tax. Excellent is the point. Proposal that the fair tax is putting forth, is that better than the income tax? It might not be perfect, but if you're going to shoot at the fair tax, you'd better be prepared to show me how the income tax does it better.
Yeah,
and I'll take that challenge all day long from anybody that wants to put it forth. And of course, the first thing he gets into is something we've seen all the time here on FAIRtax Power Radio and out in the field talking about the fair tax with people who want to give us a hard time about it. It's the old 23% versus 30% argument.
Yeah.
Of course, he will try to say, well, the fair tax people are being dishonest. They're telling you it's 23%, but it's actually 30%. And again, we've gone over this time and time again. It just depends on whether you're looking at an inclusive rate or an exclusive rate. And the income tax that the fair tax is designed to replace is quoted on an inclusive basis. If you've got $100,000 of taxable income and your tax rate is 25%, you will pay 25% of that $100,000, $25,000 in taxes. So it's you don't take how much tax you owe versus how much you get to keep. You take how much tax you owe versus the total amount that you earn. So the fair tax, which taxes spending, works the same way. If you spend $100, $23 of that is fair tax. So the fair tax portion is 23% of the total price, 23% inclusive. But if you look at that and says, all right, you put $23 worth of tax on a $77 item to make the price up to $100, that's 30%. Who cares? It's the same amount of money either way.
Exactly.
But the point that folks are making, that fair tax people are being dishonest by saying it's 23 when it's actually 30, is no, we're just trying to quote the fair tax the same way that the income tax is quoted.
And they're being dishonest by not pointing out that's exactly what they do with the income tax, as you just explained, right? Everybody knows that. Everybody understands, so why not apply the same rule that they use in the income tax to the fair tax? And that's exactly what the Americans for Fair Taxation decided to do when they came up with this thing. So 23%, 30%, 23 inclusive, 30% exclusive, it's the same amount of money.
Oh, yes. Now, then they get into something that just borders on absolutely insane. This is Hugh Hewitt quoting him now. Now, that prebate thing in the fair tax is just a nightmare. We'll get into that in the book. These guys had written a book, the Fair Tax Fantasy. And so his guest is saying, that's an unmitigated nightmare. It's administered by registering literally every American and having the government mail them a check or make a deposit every month, 12 months a year. Now, wait a minute. Don't American citizens get a Social Security number when they're born?
I believe so, yes.
So the argument that this is going to be an administrative nightmare because you're going to have to register a bunch of different people, we're already registered. People already get a Social Security number. I know when my daughter was born, she got a Social Security number. I mean, just right there.
Right.
So all of the prebate will be handled by the Social Security Administration. And if there's one thing the government's good at, it's sending out money.
Yeah, they like to write those checks. And yes, indeed, the responsibility given to the Social Security Department is going to increase. But at the same time, keep in mind that we're going to eliminate the IRS over a 3-year period once the fair tax goes into effect. So maybe now some of the people in the IRS will retire. Some of them need another job. Well, maybe they can get a job at the Social Security Department, helping out with the the load there.
Yeah, but again, which is the nightmare? Taking advantage of a registration process that's already in place. People already have Social Security numbers. Which is worse, taking advantage of that or dealing with income tax returns?
Oh boy.
You want to talk about a nightmare? I will take the income tax return as a much worse nightmare than any kind of administrative issue that these guys are trying to raise about how the prebate's going to work. Because everybody's already registered for it.
Yeah, so
all right, they already have their Social Security number. You will have to read and say, all right, these are the Social Security numbers of the people in my household that I'm claiming. So you will have to register for the prebate per se, but you've already got a Social Security number. And it's not going to be difficult at all.
Yeah.
And to think that that's going to be a nightmare and then totally ignore the nightmare that processing income tax returns is somewhat disingenuous here, guys. Sorry, Hugh.
There are so many problems with the current system, evasion, fraud, and so forth. And they just kind of ignore that.
Of course, it's interesting, too. This article, again, is almost 11 years old, and they're talking about having to mail out all these checks. Well, most of it will be direct deposit handled by computers.
Yeah.
So that's not a problem. But
that's true.
They hand out billions of dollars in welfare. The government hands out billions of dollars in Social Security, billions of dollars in other programs. So adding this prebate to it's going to be next to nothing.
Yeah, and admittedly, this article was 10, 11 years ago, and things have improved technology-wise. But still, even 10 years ago, they were doing direct deposit.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been doing direct deposit for a long time.
Now, they do get one thing right. They do say the Internal Revenue Code is a nightmare.
Yeah.
So, what are you going to replace it with? You got 70,000 plus pages, tax code and regulations and court decisions and stuff. You want to have all that, or do you want to have a 131 page bill, most of which is reference to a statute that would be repealed?
Yeah,
it does not take 131 pages to describe the fair tax. But so you really want to say the Internal Revenue Code is way too complex. If you were going to design a mistake, it probably would be the Internal Revenue Code. Yes, we'll go along with you on that one. Yes, I do. But what you want a tax system that is really, really simple for about 90% of the people. All right, how much simpler do you want it? You go to the cash register when you buy something, you pay your tax anonymously, game over, end of discussion. No more forms, no more records, no more returns, no more nothing. I dare you to make it any simpler than that.
Yeah. And then he talks about, he said, but you also want a system that for the remaining 10% are doing complicated transactions. Well, what complicated you just mentioned, like you say, you go to the store or you write a check to the plumber or something like that. The tax is included, the fair tax is included in the price, and you're done. I mean,
so there would be no more complicated transactions under the fair tax for anybody.
I believe Hank Adler, he's a professor of accounting. So they're used to all these complicated rules and investment rules and instruments and so forth. All right. All that nightmare goes away with the fair tax. And I don't think they can think about it going away.
Think we could get Hank to talk to Jade?
That would be good.
That would be good. I bet he wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Jade would eat his lunch, but...
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but we got to have something that's fair to every taxpayer. Well, what if you want to design something that's unfair? How about 70,000 pages of loopholes and deductions and exemptions and treating different groups different, just because they can afford the lobbyists to buy the tax treatment? That is not fair. That needs to go away. So that's where the fair tax is indeed much fairer, and it's not a fantasy. It works. We've got $20 million worth of research behind it that tells you that it's also interesting that we come on down there and he says, well, did you put your ideas for tax reform in this fair tax fantasy? No, we didn't want to do that. We specifically left that out. Wonder why. Oh, excuse me.
Oh, goodness.
Got me again.
Okay, I'm scrolling down here a bit. He's talking about selling a pen for $1, and says, if you want to get, in other words, you're a company, you're a retailer, and you have this particular pen. If you want to get $1 for this pen, you make this pen, no matter what it costs you, you want to sell it, and you want to get $1 back at the end of the day. Under the fair tax, what's it going to sell for? $1.30. Okay. Well, first off, if you want to get $1 for the pen, you have to make sure it's worth $1 on the open market.
Yes.
Because we do have this thing called competition.
Yes.
And if you make an inferior pen and you charge too much for it, you're not going to sell very many of them. Nope. You know, that's kind of the way it works.
Get your pens from the logo store.
There you go. So I'm thinking about this. Okay, so this pen is $1, you know, by itself. And yes, if it's $1, the fair tax on it will be 30 cents. And they're trying to make the point that it's a 30% sales tax. But as Bob explained before, if you take the 30 cents going to the fair tax and divide it by the total cost of the pen, $1.30, it comes out to 23%. Again, it's the same argument. So, inclusive or exclusive. So it's, anyways.
I want to back up a little bit to where you actually admit something. Here. He says, where we are right now, we want to demolish the attractiveness of the fair tax. I mean, he comes out and says it. It's very attractive to a lot of elected officials. Well, there are not nearly enough elected officials signing on to co-sponsor it.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure about that, since federal income taxes are too high. And
at some point, and we've talked about evasion before, at some point Congress is going to have to grapple with the reality of the current system, which is going to implode under its own weight. When they start talking about tax reform, real tax reform again, you're going to see a flurry of activity around the fair tax.
Yeah, now, Hugh again for this says, let's talk about our own self-interest, talking about him and Hank. If the fair tax were somehow adopted, I would benefit quite a lot. In fact, almost every American who makes 6 figures or more will benefit quite a lot. And his guest comes on and says, yeah, I played with the numbers last night. This is the accounting professor. And I would be a huge winner. The fair tax would reduce my taxes by about 60%. I would consider that rather...
You know what? Take a look at this chart. All right. This is the effective tax rate for 2019. This was developed by Dr. Karen Walby. Dr. Walby is the research director for the Americans for Fair Taxation, and Bob and I are lucky enough to have her here in Florida and on the board of directors for the Florida Fair Tax too. All right. Karen knows what she's talking about. And you can see by this chart the effective tax rate. All right, this is for a family of 4, mom and dad and 2 kids, and the amount of money they spend. In other words, the amount, it's assuming that they spend every penny they get, okay? Mm-hmm. So if they're right at the poverty level, $33,820, their effective tax rate is 0. How's that? Because they're getting the prebate, which reimburses them for the fair tax they'll be paying on the basic necessities. Now, if that same family of 4 gets a raise and they earn $50,000 and spend $50,000 all on new products and services, okay, their effective tax rate is 7.4. And on up it goes to the family that earns and spends $1 million, and their effective tax rate is 22.2. So you can see by this chart that the effective tax rate increases with the more that a family earns and spends. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where they get that because they make a lot of money, they're going to work out. It is possible if they want to live like hermits. You know, if they earn a lot of money and don't spend anything. You know?
Yeah, that's it. No tax if you invest it, no tax if you spend it, no tax if you give it to your kids, no tax if you donate it to charity. You only get taxed under the fair tax when you make a retail purchase of a new product, or of course buy a service, like get your hair cut or get your lawn mowed or something like that. But I'd have to really, how can the fair tax reduce anybody's taxes by 60%? That's a huge number. But he talks about it. These guys seem to say it's only going to, by implication, they're saying it's only going to benefit the rich. But what kind of a benefit would it be to a minimum wage couple who's barely getting by if there is no longer any withholding from their paycheck, there is no longer any federal payroll taxes, the most regressive taxes on the book, and you get the prebate every month, you get your whole paycheck, and you get a prebate every month. Now that would be a lot more valuable to somebody who's barely getting by than somebody who's making six figures.
The fair tax helps the people that most need it. All right, those at the lower income scales. There's one more, and then we gotta do our logo store report.
Okay.
Yeah. And you lose the deductions on which at least some people listening right now rely. So it will be devastating for charities.
Of course, you got to realize this was written well before the standard deduction was doubled a couple of years ago. So in order to take advantage of a charitable deduction, a medical expense deduction, in order to take advantage of any deduction that's written into the tax law, your deductions have to add up to more than the standard deduction. And for most people, that doesn't happen.
No, and even then, even before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, when they raised the standard deduction, all right, I remember Steve Hayes saying that 70% of tax filers could not take advantage of those deductions because they didn't make enough to cross the threshold. Then they doubled it.
Yeah.
So it's more like 90% of the people will not be able to take advantage of the deductions for charities.
Yeah. But so the argument, the fair tax takes away my deductions, is like saying the fair tax takes away the value of my cents off coupon for bread because bread is now free.
Yeah. And that's a great example that Bortz used years ago. Yep.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That
all right. Well, we got a few minutes left, and I'm going to talk about the FAIRtax logo store. This article has been instructive for us. In fact, I wrote back to the guy, Bob, that sent me the link. Mm-hmm. And I thanked him for sending. He sent me another one too, and I thanked him for sending it because I told him it was a goldmine of misinformation. I don't think he appreciated
that we could exploit and expose on FAIRtax Power Radio. Thank you.
Yeah,
appreciate that.
Anyways, okay. FAIRtaxLogoStore.org. FAIRtaxLogoStore.org. I got the nice tote bag here. All right. Did I get all my stuff out of there? Yeah. My dear wife did get it out for me. All right. There's lots of things. There's these information cards. All right. Two-sided, and they come in packets and so forth. These are handy. Keep them in your purse, keep them in your pocket, keep them in your car. I mean, we have a little bag in each of our cars with a few of these and a few things in because every once in a while we get stopped. There's campaign buttons. My wife always puts two of these on the strap of her purse, and if somebody stops and talks to her about the fair tax and seems genuinely interested, she'll give them one of them, okay? Our scrolling banners, one of our favorite items in the FAIRtax logo store.
Yeah, must have piece of equipment if you're going to a town hall.
Yep. So, and they've got pens, and they got these sticky notes with FAIRtax. Very scant information, but you can buy a bunch of these and give them away to folks. So, anyways, lots of good stuff. Shirts, hats, and the shirts now have pockets in them.
This your $1.30 pen?
Yeah.
I had no clue how much that cost.
The prebate card, as we call it, it's the size of a business card. Basic information about the fair tax on one side and the prebate schedule on the other side. We got to get going with the 2020 schedule on there. Okay. Anyways, there's a lot of stuff in the store. Go to FAIRtaxLogoStore.org. Look through the pages. Surely you'll find something there that you can use to demonstrate your support for the fair tax. It's very important that other people see that you're a supporter of the fair tax, somehow. And maybe it'll strike up a conversation and they'll get interested enough to look it up on the website, fairtax.org. So,
Indeed.
Yeah, do us a favor and go to that site and get something. And we don't make a big profit. In fact, we actually lose money. All right. We consider it an advertising expense. It's okay.
It works.
It's good.
It works.
All right. So
again,
I think that's about it, Bob.
If you'd like to send us a link,
yes,
you can. Our email address, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com, or you can post it on our Facebook page, the FAIRtax Guys, and we will get it. We read them all. We don't respond to them all because some of them, are just trolls that want to cause trouble. But if you've got a legitimate question or concern about the fair tax, leave us a message there, either at our email address or on our Facebook page, and we will dig it up.
I want to remind people, not only do we have the videos, but we have a podcast of the show,
yes.
Okay, which you can get on Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, and iHeart. So however you want to listen to.
What have you?
I forgot to shut the sound off on my computer. You forgot your sound
on your timer. I was wondering whether I don't know if the microphone picked that up or not. But.
Oh yeah, it will.
Okay.
Anyways, hey, this is a homegrown show. What are you going to do?
I think I'm going to go home, take a nap.
Okay. All right. So
once again, we are the FAIRtax Guys. I'm Bob Paxton,
and I'm Ron Molero.
The FAIRtax Guys are reminding you once again that the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So what do you need from me to get these taxes collected?
Glad you asked, because there is a fair amount of information you need to be aware of.
That's your tax plan?
Oh, no, this is just the revisions for this year's tax plan. What I need from you is you need to keep track of all of your income, as well as any taxes that you've already paid, also any gifts that you received or gifts you've given to churches or charities or individuals throughout the entire year. Do you do any side jobs?
Every now and again.
Great, because there's some more information about that right here. Everything you need to know right here. So just simply compile that, send it in to us. Be careful, make sure there's no mistakes. If we do find mistakes, or maybe we can fine you or, throw you in jail. So you might want to be aware of that.
And what do you need from me?
As an individual, nothing. As a business owner, or if you're doing side jobs, yes, you would have to collect taxes on that, but, it's all right here.
Can I get a copy of that?